Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello and welcome to an exciting episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast. I'm John McMahon and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, John Kaplan, also known as Cap.
Johnny Mac, how are you, brother?
Good, dude. You?
I'm doing fantastic. Excited for this podcast today with JD.
Yeah, you should be. So he's a very special guest. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it, Johnny. He started his incredible career as a college and professional football player. Then he moved into sales where he was selling medical device equipment and computer-aided design software. But football came calling again, so he became a receiver coach for an NFL team. Then offensive coordinator for a D1 college team, and then head coach at a D1 college team, which he'll tell us a little bit about. And he now manages and runs a private equity firm. Please welcome my friend, JD Brookhart.
Hey, John. Hey, Cap. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're really, really ecstatic to have you, JD. And you know, we use a lot of sports analogies and football analogies. And since we have somebody with, you know, great character and background to kind of mix these in with us today, I'd love to just kick it off and ask you about some of the parallels that, you know, for coaching success, and what have you found are some of the keys to coaching young players to be successful?
Yeah, well, it was an eye-opener for me. I learned a lot. Obviously, the sales background that I had with Xerox and with John at Parametric were extremely valuable, but learned some quick lessons early in coaching. And I had a young kid from the inner city of Cleveland that I was coaching, big 6'4", 240, and we were in our beginning workouts when we first got there trying to change the culture. And I said something to him and he looked at me. I said, "Hey, come on, trust me, John." And he looked at me and he goes, "I don't trust anybody but my mom." And that's when I realized you really had to invest and to care and let these guys develop some trust in you. We went on that first game we were playing in that fall. I remember standing in the national anthem next to John. And it was one of my greatest moments in football. This is my first time I'm coaching legitimately with these college kids. He puts his arm around me. He goes, "Hey, coach, I trust you, man." And so it really changed the way I approached these kids. I just assumed because I'd been in the NFL that they were going to take my knowledge as the word, and it wasn't the case. You know, so I think developing that trust and really caring for those kids on a different level is a big piece of it. And then also, once you get to that point, I think it was Tom Landry said something like, you know, a coach is somebody who tells you what you don't want to hear, shows you what you don't want to see, so you can become what you always dreamed of.
Wow.
And that was kind of my motto. Here's what I'm doing. It's nothing personal, but I'm going to show you where you're making mistakes. I'm going to talk to you about those things. And then the other thing I learned from one of the best mentors I ever had was a constant, consistent message. You know, are you telling them the same things repeatedly over and over that it becomes drilled into their psyche? So those were some of the things I felt really helped me help these young guys succeed.
So JD, that happens with a lot of sales leaders too, where they have a team and I think they believe that, hey, I'm now the sales leader, so everybody should just trust me and do what I say and do what I tell them to do. And can you walk through a little bit of how you actually believe you built that trust with that player?
Well, one, you got to listen, right? I mean, everybody's got a life. You don't know what's going on in that life in that particular moment. So I think you got to be attentive to those things. But I think you got to do some things that are in a real personal nature, whether that's having all the receivers over for a barbecue at the house that they see in a different environment. Might be taking out your employees for a dinner or a drink, but they need to see as a person, not just as that sales leader, that coach. And I think that helps the bonding piece of it that you develop with that group. And, and then you find those times where you can get them one-on-one and find out more about them, and you help them through some situations. These kids a number of them came from some real difficult backgrounds. Right. And, to do things to help them become a better man was a big part of what I thought I was doing and why I wanted to be at the collegiate level.
Yeah. In sales, we talk about the fact that you need to almost get intimate with some of your people. And the way to do that is, you're on a plane, you're in a train, you're in a car. Use that time not to look at your phone, but to get to know the person so you know what drives them, what their background was, what their motivations, fears, and those types of things are in order to build that type of trust.
Absolutely. I had a young man that was a talented kid. He actually won the Bolitnikoff Award as the top receiver in the nation as a sophomore. And just through spending time with him, I made him come in early every time we were having receiver meetings, just because I knew he couldn't take corrections in front of the group. You had to do it prior to, you gloss over it in front of his peer group, and he reacted much better that way. So you have to take those things into account because you're dealing with a lot of different diverse personalities.
Yeah. See, that's
JD,
the thing. I think a lot of new leaders, especially brand new sales leaders, believe that everybody's just like they are. So everybody's cookie cutter and they treat everybody the same. And then what you're really bringing out here is that every single player is completely different. You really got to get to know those players in order to be able to motivate them.
Yeah, without doubt. And you got to know yourself too. I thought I was a certain way, and we had a sports psychologist come in and spend some time with the coaching staff, and he really helped me understand how I operated, what motivated me. I didn't want success. I didn't want money. My motivation was a fear of failure, plain and simple, and would work to make sure I didn't. And so, he taught us how to really dig in and find out what got these guys going.
Yeah. But I think what you're also bringing out, one more point, Johnny, sorry.
Yeah.
I think what you're also bringing out, which is really important, is it's not only you getting to know the players on your team, but it's your ability to understand your effect on those players, like what motivates you and how you might be coming across to those different players, because that's really key in being able to motivate people.
No question. We'd always, I shared those things with the players, what really got me going, what I was trying to do. And, the motto we always had in the receiver room was the difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. And to create that culture and to motivate those kids in their different ways to achieve those things. So it's a fine mix. It's a fine mix of stirring it up, just getting it right on a consistent basis with a very broad group of young men.
And JD, you've had a great spectrum of realization of understanding yourself and then your relationship with your players, and you get that kind of operating rhythm down, and then you become kind of like the CEO. When you become a head coach, now you're managing other coaches, and younger people have a tendency to look at hypocrisy, or they have a nose for it, and their old saying about losing the locker room when you ask people to do stuff that you're unwilling to do yourself, or that you're being hypocritical around. What is some of the great advice that you've given to new coaches, new leaders, as it relates to really establishing those relationships?
Well, I think, one, they have to see your actions like you talked about, the servant leadership of how you treat people. We used to have high school 7-on-7 tournaments at our indoor facility. And you had the old little green Gatorade cups right here that I still use these, that we used to have the kids get their water from. And well, you got 20 different teams in this indoor facility. A lot of 16 and 17-year-olds aren't really adept to taking care of things like it's their own. So they just throw them on the ground. Camp would end and there'd be 800 cups around the field. And, coaches would sit there on the sideline. They'd be talking with each other, other people. And I'd go and start picking up the cups. And eventually those guys would come and do those things. But, I think everybody's got to establish their own genuine leadership role. And I think you have to encourage that piece of it. You can certainly model it. You can certainly school them on different ways to approach these things. But it still goes back to, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And if I did anything, I certainly did that with the coaches that I had. But really, I tell you, the greatest advice I had as I got my first head coaching job was my father-in-law, who was a CEO and founder of a big company. He told me in this, he goes, number one, you got to have 3 rules to hiring. Number 1, you got to know how to hire. 2, you got to know how to fire. And number 3 is you got to do number 1 so well you don't have to do number 2. Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot of time on that piece of hiring the right guys. And if you look at the guys I've hired, almost to a T, they've all gone on and done very, very well.
Mm. Let's stay on that a little bit, JD. So recruiting, especially at the college level where players are changing every year, can be a real grind. But recruiting, if you recruit a great team, you can look really good as a leader, whether that's business or football. Can you talk a little bit about how, as a coach, you had to, recruiting and what some of the things that you had to do?
Wow, I can't imagine what these guys are going through today with the transfer portal. It's nuts, and I hear what Saban's doing. He's got a very good handle on it. But back in the day, it wasn't as easy to transfer. So recruiting to me was something that was a year-round process. I always tell you, it's not about the X's and the O's. It's about the Johnnies and the Joes. And the better players you get, the better you're going to be. There's a lot more to that because you also have to get into the chemistry and character of a group. But it was a year-round proposition that we had to diligently take time out and spend time on that, because that goes back to the relationships you build. That's how you differentiate yourself with these high school kids and convincing them why they're going to come to your university. But as much as, like John, for example, we brought you up to teach our guys about sales, the staff we had that, I was the only one that had any background in the business. Right. And certainly it comes from an industry expert than your head coach. So I appreciated you doing that and made a difference with the number 1 recruited class in our division. But recruiting's not once you figure out how to recruit and to sell what you have, the evaluation thing really is the biggest, because you can find some great players. You look at every Super Bowl and there's a bunch of 2-star players that are on that field. They're not 4 and 5 stars across the board. And so the evaluation
is that go to the character of the person a lot of times that you're recruiting character?
I think that's a huge piece of it. But also philosophy. We used to like to take a bunch of these tall kids that were a little bit thin at the time, but had a decent frame. I used to look at wrists and knees and how big they were going to get. And there's a kid down in Columbus, Ohio, that was a really good lacrosse player, good football player, not a great one, but he was about 6'6", 240. Well, Ohio State's not going to take that kid. They want the ready-made. And so we took that kid, ended up putting on 100 pounds in about a year and a half, became a 3-year starter and a heck of a player. So, as you're going through, the evaluation piece is just the biggest part of it. I think then you add the ability to differentiate yourself in that recruiting process, which you helped us with, John. That's a big deal. And, I think most people that haven't been in the business, they're going to go throw everything at the wall and hope something sticks with the kid. And, I thought we did a good job of really having our coaches go in and find out who really was the champion. Was there a mentor in the area that really had this kid's ear? Who was the decision maker that was helping him? Who's going to lead you through this? Sometimes it's a teacher, but if you don't ask those questions, if you don't dig deep, and if you're just going to throw everything out, kind of luck of the draw at that point. You want to steer things to your favor. And so as you're leading these questions and you're hoping that you're taking them on a path that really hits your bright spots as a school.
Yeah. And then the other difficulty is not that you have to recruit these kids every year. The other difficulty is, like in sales, you may just have 5 guys that are going to a territory. So pretty much it's the same position. What the difficulty you have in football is every position is completely different set of skills, set of knowledge, and types of characteristics you're looking for. So that had to make it more difficult too, to find the ideal candidates for each position.
It was, you set your position parameters, your minimums that you were looking for. You always had exceptions to those, right? One of the best kids I ever coached was a 5'5" running back that, most kids signed in February. We took him late in April, because we needed somebody, just some depth. And this kid ended up being an all-league player. And so you can't stick exactly to those parameters, but you also got to consider the gettability of these kids. Are you going to waste a lot of time on a kid that's looking at Alabama and Ohio State if you're at a University of Akron?
Right.
Not very often, right? And so you got to be conscious about where you spend your time and how these kids meet the parameters, and then you've got to dig deep into what I believe is really a cornerstone to a program is the character and chemistry of it. And do they fit that? Are they those kind of guys? And, one of the questions we really dug to find out is, do they love ball? Or do they like being on Twitter, Facebook, and showing highlights? Because those guys, not necessarily. Sometimes they're not the guys in the weight room putting the extra effort in, and in 2 years are going to be a better player than that all-state kid that somebody else took.
Right.
JD, before we go to fit, I want to dig in on that because I think that's a huge part of the discussion, which would be valuable for our listeners. I want you to contemplate just all of your experience in business, in sports, in private equity now. How important is it, you having that vantage point of coaching other coaches? Can you be successful without being a good recruiter? So like from a football perspective, there are coaches that I saw that could really coach, but they struggled recruiting. And it's vice versa. Where would you what has been your experience? Can you be a great leader without being a good recruiter, in your opinion?
I don't know that you're ever going to be elite. You could, on a staff of 10 guys, have 2 guys that's not their strength, and you can really, shift that work to some other people, put them more in the evaluation phase of things. But no, that was one of the first and foremost things that I looked for with these guys. How would they interact with these kids? Would they have the capabilities of selling what we're trying to sell? And would they have, you got to do a lot of extra work in recruiting if you're going to do a good job. You got to dig and spend extra time. And you can be successful, but most of your staff has to be dang good at it.
And there's an old saying that says, sometimes the best players don't make the best coaches. What's been your experience about people that have struggled, been great performers, but have struggled figuring out how to communicate that performance to others? What's been your experience with that?
It is absolutely dead on. I'm not saying that a great player can't be a great coach. But the guys that I've seen that are really good coaches many times have been walk-ons trying to prove themselves. And, guys that worked up the ranks that came from smaller schools, played at there's a school in California called University of Pacific that some phenomenal coaches like Pete Carroll have come from. No, I don't, sometimes those guys that have been there, they don't understand all it takes to be good and the time that you have to put in to be great. Some people are just extremely blessed to be very talented. And but the kids that overachieve are the ones, those are always the guys I've always looked for.
I think that's true in real life. You had Ted Williams was one of the greatest natural baseball players, wasn't such a good coach. Wayne Gretzky, just phenomenal hockey player. Didn't do so well as a coach. Right. And your point, they have to have struggled through that skill development and learning the game, whereas to other people it just came natural. So if you haven't struggled through it, you may not know how to develop other players.
There's no doubt. And that's, when you look at it, you'll see some guys, Mike Vrabel, Tennessee Titans. Mike was a great player at Ohio State.
Yeah.
To me, he's a little bit of an exception to the rule, but I got to know Mike when Tressel used to let us come down to his Ohio State camps. And Mike then was out of football, but he was grinding his way to get back in, trying to find an in with anybody. And I knew, you know what, this guy, he's got it. He gets it. He finds every way he can to put himself in front of other coaches. Can I help with this? And so it's really neat to see a guy like that who was one of the talented ones, but has achieved, obviously a high status as a head football coach. So it's not a rule, but I'd go along the lines of the walk-ons most of the time.
Yeah, it's about they're consciously competent. Like, once you figure out why you're good and you have the ability to teach somebody else by kind of meeting them wherever they are, those combinations, I think, make great coaches. But for our listeners, I mean, I've always warned the great performers that are always barking about, I want to be the leader, I want to be the leader, I want to be the leader. And when you put those people in early situations, like allowing them to have the job, to do things about a job, maybe a future job, without having the future job, my experience is they struggle a bit, like you said, Johnny Mac, and it's really good for them to really get in touch with, okay, my job now is to understand why I'm good, and I have to meet somebody where they are and help them get better. It's more complicated than people think. It really is.
There's no doubt. And I think, as John, you talked about, sometimes when you've got a natural skill set and you haven't gone through the grind, you miss a lot of the little details it takes to be great. And those are the things that, to me, define really the great ones when they get the whole package down.
So we were talking a little bit about fit before we jumped over to this one. So thanks for holding on to that thought. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things. I'd love to hear your experiences about kids that you saw, or people, it doesn't matter, in business or in football or what have you. You knew instantly they're going to add to the locker room. And then kids that you saw that were going to give you a stomach ache. You saw their talent, but you saw a stomach ache for the locker room. Could you could you give us your experience of how did you work your way through that? And, not just go for the talent. You have to think about the impact of the talent on the team.
Yeah, that leads me to probably one of my biggest failures in my career. We had done some good things. So when I took over the University of Akron, never had a league title in 115 years and hadn't been to but I think it was one bowl game. So in our second year, we won the league championship on the last play of the game, went to a bowl game. And, we had trained the staff pretty well to recruit. We were beating Michigan State on kids, beating Kansas State, big Power 5 schools because of our success, because of the way our guys recruited. And that next year we came out and we had some young freshmen, that were big-time players. And we went down to North Carolina State. Chuck Amato had a really good football team. And we beat North Carolina State at North Carolina State on the last play of the game. And it was the first BCS win in the school's history.
Wow.
Well, from there, it was a roller coaster. We lost to Central Michigan the next week, did some good things up and back, and ended up missing a bowl game. And after careful reviewing the year, I went into my AD and I said, I screwed up. I didn't keep character and chemistry part of the scheme. I took some kids that really aren't a fit. I got to get rid of 7 talented players, if we're going to get this going in the direction we want to get it. That's going to be a tough year next year. But I think it's the right thing to do. So very conscious about that in everything I do since that point. It was just, you've got to understand that piece of it. I mean, there can be a lot of guys that can help you succeed, but holy cow, if you don't look into them, they can bring down a locker room. They can bring down a sales force. They can really affect you in such a negative way. So that piece of it, to me, is just too important to ignore, and really probably the biggest mistake I've made coaching or business.
But you had the courage to fix it, it sounds like. You didn't languish in it. You fixed it right away.
No, I mean, it was so obvious to me. And it hurt me to the core that I missed that, because those are things that I had been about. I got caught up in the hype, and boy, is this going to look great. And you know what? It wasn't the right thing. And, shame on me for doing that. And, but that goes to another point too. As a first-time head coach, you're going to go through those growing pains. I love it when I watch the industry and I see guys that hire second-time guys like New England did with Belichick. You learn so much in that first head role, leadership role, that, sometimes guys don't succeed, but a lot of people then don't take advantage of that experience and those failures that they have.
Right.
And you see a lot of guys come back and just have taken those lessons and elevated those sales forces, those teams to a different level because of the time they had in that role, that they learned a lot.
Yeah, you can learn a lot more from your failures than you can from some of your successes, for sure.
No doubt.
Hey, JD, in your locker room, before the players went out on the field, I think you used to have some motto up on the door. I can't remember specifically what it said. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, we actually had a couple. We always had in the locker room, both practice locker room and the game locker room, an old sign we stole from Boston College locker room. And it talked about a football game. It basically said there were an average of 72 offensive plays. Each play lasted 3.8 seconds. That's 4 minutes and 12 seconds. If you can't give 5 minutes of your best here in the next 3 hours to go, you don't need to be in this locker room.
Right. So give me the best 5 minutes of your day right now.
Yeah. But we also had another one that was been very personal for me. I was having lunch with a reporter, and we got to talk, and he saw that I like quotes and different authors and things, and he led me to this guy named Nathaniel Darby. Nathaniel Darby was a guy in Colorado, which is where I'm from, so I guess maybe that hit a little bit of a note. But he found some gold on his land back in the 20s, and he went out and borrowed some money from family, bought equipment, tools, and finding a little bit of gold here, finding a little bit there. After a year, got a little frustrated. He was like, I can't do this. Sold the equipment and the land to some guy. And that guy dug 3 more feet and hit a vein of gold and was rich beyond his means.
Wow.
And Nathaniel Darby at that point said, never again. I will not stop. I'll go 3 more feet, whatever we do. And this guy became the national leading insurance salesman back in the mid to late 20s. And so we took that 3 more feet motto and we put it in, and we said, hey, whatever anybody's doing, they're going 40 yards. There's usually a cone. We put that cone down, and then we put another cone 3 feet past that.
Awesome.
We did that from spring through fall in every drill that we did. So we just said these yards are going to add up. We're going to find a way to, outwork people and do a little bit more than everybody else. And it was really interesting. So we're playing Northern Illinois in the MAC championship game. And it's 4th and 17 with 17 seconds left. And we call a play, and we run a double post, and our tight end runs a good depth, and our quarterback pumps it, and the front safety comes up. Our receiver outside, who ended up winning a couple Super Bowls with the Giants, sticks his guy and widens him to get away from the safety, goes over the top. Kid pumps, and he throws deep to the kid. And the safety was on the tight end, ran around, turned back, was going after the ball. And we catch this thing sliding into the end zone with 10 seconds left in the game and going over this DB's hand by about 3 feet.
Wow.
And ended up winning 31-30, and just it was phenomenal. Changed the course of the school. We went up in admissions that year like 37%.
Holy smokes! Yeah.
So it was interesting. So those were the 2 signs that you saw, and some of those things carried on to what I'm doing now.
JD, give me an example of, we all can remember the kids that hurt us in the locker room or situations that were obvious. People with great talent, but they just didn't have the character, what have you. Give me an example or anything that you can remember about the kid that you just found the perfect fit for. And you might not have seen it in recruiting, but they were on the team. They found their place in life, and they just not only elevated themselves, but elevated everybody else around them. So like for this, like spotting talent that's already on your team that can actually raise the team to the next level. But that person might not even be aware of it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I can tell you right now, the number one guy that stands out is a kid named Yogi Roth. Not a kid anymore. He's actually a Pac-12 announcer. Yogi was a kid from middle of Pennsylvania, came up to camp about 5'10", 180 pounds, not very fast, and wanted to be a Division I receiver. And so he came to the camp and sat down with him afterwards. I said, I'm going to find better than you. And but I said, Yogi, you got a lot that you bring a lot to this football team, and if you work hard, you can find a way to play here maybe someday. So I'd love to have you as a walk-on. And he was hurt by that. As my wife said, I heard a lot of people with honesty about where I thought they could play and where they couldn't play. But he ended up coming, and it'd be funny. Every year he'd come into me, say, Coach, what do I need to do to start? And I tell him the same thing every spring. Yogi, if you start, we're in trouble. But here's what I need you to do. You need to train these guys all summer. I said, I trust you. The quarterbacks trust you. And there's going to be a time and a place when you are on the field in critical situations. And so he did that. He took it to heart. And that kid went out and he trained him and he worked and kept a great attitude. And we're playing Miami, Florida, to go to the Orange Bowl. And it's 4th and 7. And we got Larry Fitzgerald at the time. So we call a play for Larry. And Larry's open. And Yogi runs this deeper route. And our quarterback had so much trust in the kid, he threw it to him. To Yogi.
Over Larry Fitzgerald.
Over Larry.
Oh, holy smokes.
But this is a kid also that, he not only did that, but he went and did an internship with the mayor one summer, then with a financial institution, comes out of college, and he gets on Pete Carroll's staff as a graduate assistant. Next thing you know, he's doing movies. He's directing, directed a film. He now works for the Pac-12 network and does some things in Hollywood, and he just knew he was going to be a successful guy. But he changed the dynamics of our locker room just because of the kind of kid he was. And people gravitated towards him. They listened to him. And, he had an unbelievable work ethic, and they modeled that because if this guy who wasn't going to play much could do those things, then, dang well they could too.
Did he catch the ball, JD?
No.
and you said to the court, what did you say to the quarterback when he came off?
I couldn't believe that. No,
Fitzgerald.
It says everything about the kid, right? I mean, our quarterback would do that.
No, the quarterback really thought that he trusted him. Like you said, he's been around him like basically all year, and he's like, okay, I'm throwing to the kid. He deserves it. But I mean that's a great story, right? You don't have to tell the ending like that, John. You could have held that question. It was a much better story before you said it.
Oh,
I know
awesome.
that I was wondering what happened, so I'm sure a lot of other people are wondering what happened.
No, those.
Well, you did finish the story, though, JD. You finished the story. You talked about where he is now. Football was a little chapter of his life. Where he is now and what he's done is really the end of the story.
Absolutely.
Which is awesome. Hey, we were talking earlier, and I think we kind of blew over this, so I want to give you a little some major kudos. So you take over a program that was a down program at the time. You walk in, I think 2004 to 2005, like in a very short period of time, you turn this program over. You take I thought I read you took them to the first bowl game, and it might be in the second bowl game, but it was a long period of time between bowl games. And then you get Coach of the Year in the conference in 2005. What I'm really interested for our listeners to hear is, when you take over a program, it's not just the football team and the recruiting. You got to get everybody around you to believe. You got to get administration to believe. You got to get the academic counselors to believe. You got to get the boosters to believe. And would you mind just taking a few minutes, just going back to that time frame in your mind and talk about the alignment? Because there's people out there that are like, they're deciding whether, do I take over that project and is it going to be too hard? Or do I try to find something where, you know, maybe somebody steps away from a top program or what have you in business or whatever? Could you just talk about your thought process, number one? And number two, how did you get everybody aligned behind what you were trying to do?
You know, it's interesting. That was one of the first things that came to my mind was the culture and how you change that. And, you know, football has a bad rap of being their own little entity.
Yeah.
You know, and everybody's supposed to support them. And that wasn't my mindset at all. You know, I thought we were real privileged to have the opportunity to play football there, to have our education paid for. And so we did enormous things to reach the community. I was at the band concerts. I'd have players at band concerts in uniforms. We would raise money and get money to the cheerleaders and the pom-poms and things like that. Academic counseling. I was an academic All-American, the only goal I achieved in college that I wanted. And so I made sure that my players and our support system understood that was going to be a piece of it. You know, that whatever they did, they were going to walk out of here with a degree, a meaningful degree. So, you know, I remember going out and buying pizzas, delivering them to the frats and the sororities just to get people to games. So I touched, or part of our staff touched everywhere on campus. You know, we'd be in our student union, making sure that people saw us there helping out. Community service. We would go to the hospitals, Children's Hospital, on Fridays before games and deliver some things to the kids there. So we made it very known that we wanted to be their team, and we were going to support the community as much as they supported us. And to this day, I think it's one of the greatest things we did because, you know, it was interesting to see. You'd see a band player come on the field after the game and give one of our players a hug. Those two never had talked before that. And so you create an energy and a synergy within the community there that really rallies it and gives it something it hasn't had in a long time. You know, we go to this bowl game and we had bus after bus heading from Ohio to Detroit for this bowl game. And they hadn't had much to be excited about in a long time there. So, right. But it was an important piece, just like you said, you have to reach all the entities. It's so much easier when you have your other team members that maybe not feel as big a part of it on your side. It's no different with the sales force, a company. You got to make sure you're touching everybody and they feel important to the process.
Yeah, outstanding.
Hey, JD,
we've
all been
Johnny.
on some winning teams, and we've also been on some situations where things aren't going right, whether that's, you know, the current quarter as a sales guy or the current scoreboard or the number of wins during the season. You know, can you share any lessons about leading teams when it's a like a difficult situation? You look around and people aren't all looking like they're up and ready to go, you know?
Yeah. No, that you know, I think that it kind of depends where you've come from, right? If you haven't won before, then you really better look and self-reflect on why. But you know, we had a situation where we turned things around at Pitt pretty quick. You know, they had 11 straight losing seasons. We were in a bowl game the first year, winning record. And we come out, I guess it was 3 years later, and we decided to do a few things new with the no-huddle offense and speed things up. And we lose to South Florida, who wasn't very good at the time. And I think that put us at like 1-4 or 1-5. And we'd just been to a bowl game the previous season when AD comes in and basically reads us the riot act and said, you know, things better change quickly. And he walked out of the room, and I remember our head coach, and it was a great, great lesson for me. He looked back at me and goes, It's not like all of a sudden any of you guys are not good coaches anymore. You were good coaches the last 3 years. You're good coaches right now. We are sticking to our plan. We tweaked a few things, but we stuck to what we believed in because we had success with it.
Yeah.
But like I said, if you're someone who's getting there for the first time and not having a lot of success, then yeah, you better take a look at yourself and see what you're doing incorrectly. But I think a big part of it was sticking to it and continuing the same consistent message of what you're trying to do. And there's going to be those times, right? Whatever, marriage, business, athletics, you got to grind through it. Yeah. And, it doesn't mean you can't look in areas for improvement, but half the battle is being there, right? And sticking to it.
Yeah. And as a leader in those situations, almost all the time, you always have somebody peeping in your ear who thinks they know what's best. So as a leader, what becomes really difficult, maybe you talk a little bit to this, is you hear what they say, and then you have to register whether or not that does make sense to do that or not. Sometimes it is a really great idea, and sometimes it's just somebody that just has a freaking strong opinion, but it's a terrible idea,
Right.
As you talked about before, even, when you're at Akron, you had all these different people around you, all these different groups, and probably everybody had a freaking opinion on what you should do next. How do you handle that?
Yeah, no, I think, the one thing I always thought is you hire people smarter than you, right? Hire people who can do your job. And I think you have to take into account what you're hearing from people. But you also got to evaluate those relationships and their motivations of what they're looking for. Some people have absolutely great insight, and it's extremely valuable if you have an open environment, to take that advice and go that direction. Because you know what, that guy saw it a little different than I did, and that's okay. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, so let's look at it. Now ultimately it falls on me, and I've got to make decisions.
Right.
And I think that's what you have to believe. So I was always open to hearing people's ideas and their thoughts. And if it made sense, no problem. We can go that route. If it didn't make sense and I didn't believe in it, then certainly that wasn't a great choice for the direction of the program I was running. But I think you have to instill the ability for those guys and your group to bring things to you. Because there are. There's a lot of great ideas out there.
Yeah.
A lot of great input that you can get. You've got to manage that, and that's on you as a leader. But certainly to shut it off because you're sitting in the top seat is probably a pretty stupid thing to do, right?
Yeah. For sure. For sure. So, I think one of the things that you're talking about, though, is, which you've mentioned a couple times, is consistency. I think what happens when the numbers aren't showing the right way, they're not positive, then people start to think, oh, maybe we could take a shortcut here. And at least what I found out is there's no freaking shortcut.
There's no shortcut. There never is. And if there is, there's consequences to it. Right?
Totally.
Yeah. Always.
Yeah.
So, that's not the path I know or believe in. So,
JD, I'm dying to, I think you're such a humble dude. The way Johnny described you, I'm so glad that our listeners are getting a chance to hear you. You started off as a walk-on at Brigham Young, and you go and you start for 3 years in Colorado. You wind up with a shot at the NFL, and you're an academic All-American. And what I'm most fascinated about your background is the diversity of your career. So you have an athletic background, you have high academics, you go into corporate America, you make a decision in corporate America to follow your passion in coaching. Could you walk us through at a high level, how did you balance decision criteria with personal, family, whatever it was, to make decisions to follow your path? And think about all the listeners that we have that are, it's one thing to say follow your passion, but it ain't as easy to make it happen. So what are some of the big things that you used as criteria to just keep you grounded with those decisions?
Well, it was, I guess it's part of its phases of life, right? So I'm young and I'm set. I know what I want to do. I want to coach college football. And so I'm set to go to UCLA as a graduate assistant. I'm going to get my MBA while I'm there. And I have a chance to go to the NFL. And so I passed up that opportunity to coach to go into the NFL. And I'm 21, 22 years old. I don't make it, I get cut. And, like most young guys at that time, we didn't want to stay at home, right? Now these kids all want to stay at home till they're 30. I wanted to get out. So I got a job. And it was in sales. It was at a golf tournament. And eventually the guy said, you're pretty good at this. You should try and get more formal training. And that's when I went and interviewed for Xerox. So I started to make money, and I grew up fairly poor. My dad was a teacher, 5 kids, and, it was kind of fun to make a little bit of money. So I went through the sales and got recruited a couple different ones. And I'm sitting in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'm 30 years old, and I'm still single. I'm like, I can't give up. I want to coach, and I want to coach college. And so, here's, I guess, one of my things that I've done well in my life is I believe in a path, the best path to your goal. And I also believe in the power of who and the ability to use those contacts. And so I said, well, how am I going to get to coach college? And again, I didn't have a wife at the time. And I said, well, I'm going to go start in the NFL, right? I'm selling CAD/CAM software. They should hire me. So I called a guy, my college roommate's dad, played golf with Mike Shanahan regularly. I said, can you get me 30 minutes with him? He goes, yeah, why? I told him what I wanted to do. He goes, yeah, I guess I can. And so I met with Shanahan. I'm in my suit, and he's in his T-shirt and shorts, and just gotten the job at the Broncos, and I told him what I wanted to do. And keeping it short, he told me no 11 times in 30 minutes. And finally, I think he just got sick of me and told me I could come to camp. And so I did everything they asked. I'm 30 years old. I'm getting gas for their cars. I'm holding bags for drills, and whatever they asked me to do, I do. And do that for a couple of years, and they ended up getting me the job at Pittsburgh. And so, I was able to leverage some things. I got an offer from Green Bay after a year or 2 years there. And I'd set goals. One of my goals was to be a coordinator by the time I was 35. And at that time, I was a young guy, and I wanted to be a head Division I coach by the time I was 40. So got an offer from Green Bay, went back to the head coach and said, what's it going to take to keep you? I said, make me the coordinator. Well, I'm 34 years old, and I become the coordinator at Pitt. So now maybe this is too much more than you want to hear. But,
this is great. This is great. Yeah.
So then we were doing pretty well at Pitt offensively, have a lot of success. And the University of Akron job comes open. And I call up the AD who I had met at an Elite 8 basketball game. I said, hey, Mike, I'd really like to apply for that. I said, great, call my headhunter. So I called the headhunter. He said, send me your resume. So I sent him the resume. He goes, you're not even close. You haven't been coaching enough, you had enough experience, you got no chance. Okay. So I called the AD back up, and I said, Mike, give me 1 hour. I'll meet you in Youngstown, Ohio. An hour for you, hour for me. Just give me an hour. So I guess it went well enough that I ended up getting brought in for the final 5. And, I thought I'd put together a pretty good plan. If I could, I'd love to talk about that in a second, my head coaching notebook. But I did well. I think they offered somebody before me, quite honestly. But I was down in Orlando. Larry Fitzgerald was picking up the Bolitnikoff Award, and I get a call. Said, hey, would you take the job? I said, yeah. He goes, well, it's only going to pay X amount. I'm like, Mike, I don't care. Yeah, I'll take that job. So I become the head Division I football coach at age 39. I'm the second youngest Division I football coach in the nation at the time. I'm actually first games against Joe Paterno. He's in his 39th year as a head coach.
Wow. Wow.
You're 39 and he's been coaching 39.
Yeah. And so did that. We had some success at Akron, had some things go perfectly wrong, got fired in 09. And my father-in-law asked me if I would run their family foundation. I said, well, I'm getting paid another year from Akron, but if CU or Texas calls me, I want to go back to coaching. Otherwise, I'll run the foundation. And in December, they called and said, CU called and said, you want to come coach? I said, absolutely. It was an old friend of mine. That was a disaster. They fired us. They should have fired us. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking. I've got 4 boys. We've moved now the last few years quite a bit. I'm like, I don't know if I want to go this path. Different phase of life. And so I went back. I said, hey, I'll run the foundation, but we need to do more than that. And that's when we started the holding company. And he had one investment he was working on. And we eventually grew that to 3 different companies that we're investing in, and hard stuff, material science. So it's not easy. We're still in the phase of making it happen, but I think we're really close to 2 of them. I think it's a phase of life, and I think it's a bit of how willing and determined you are to make things happen for yourself. And do you appreciate the path that you're going down? Have you established good contacts? Are you willing to use those contacts? Because I talk to my boys about that constantly. I look back on it, and I don't know of a job I got by myself. I had somebody helping me or somebody I met along the way that just changed the course of my life. And so, I just feel fortunate to be around the people I've met through the course of my career. But do want to circle back. You got time?
Yeah, you're a humble guy, dude.
Yeah, really.
Humble guy.
I just want to summarize like what I heard as a listener there. Like one thing that you did is you talked about consistency before in coaching, and what you did is you stayed true to your goals. Even when the thing came up at Green Bay and some other things where you could have went off on a tangent, you had set goals, and there were other distractions and other decision processes you had to go through, but you stayed true to your goals. You stayed consistent. And then at the end of the day, I think you were very, very realistic. So those are the, things that I took from your story.
I mean, I guess to add to that, there was another time I got a call from the Arizona Cardinals after Larry had left Pitt, and they wanted me to leave the Akron head job to become the receiver coach at Arizona. And it was $10,000 a month more than I was making at Akron. And, that decision process was way different. That wasn't about me. That wasn't about my family. That was about 10 different families and whose lives that would have affected by taking that job, because they would have went a different direction for a head coach. And so it did keep me on my path, like you said, consistency. I turned down a lot of money that might have been nice for the family at the time. We're kind of check to check, a little better than check to check, but we weren't raking it in by any means.
Right.
So I think you got to go back to a little bit of the character piece too. You can't, there's times in life where you got to look at for yourself and your family. But sometimes there's a greater whole that you got to look after too.
Yeah.
Awesome. JD, talk about, I know you're talking about you want to talk to us about the playbook or the operating rhythm that you had, the head coaching book. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, this was a really good experience for me. So when the AD agreed to see me for an hour, we were getting ready to play Miami that week. And, you work 6 a.m. to 10 basically during the week. And so after 10, this graduate assistant and I would get down and we'd work on my head coaching notebook, which is what you're presenting to the ADs and all their board. And so I had known Bill Cowher, Mike Malarkey, Shanahan, and I had their notebooks. And so I'm piecing these things together. Oh, this is good, and this is good. Oh, that sounds good. And finally, I was like a day and a half into this and putting all this Mike Malarkey, Bill Cowher, Shanahan stuff together. I'm like, wait a minute, this isn't what I'm about. And so I just thought about, how did I get to where I'm at now, and what am I going to base this program on? And that turned the corner for me, both in terms of, I think, probably getting the job, but really having a culture that I created there. And I look back on my life, I was about 3 things. It was about accountability, productivity, and persistence. And I carried that message to the students. So we're going to have accountability on the field, in the classroom, and in the community. We're going to be as productive as we can on the field, in the classroom, and in the community. And we're going to persist without exception. And that's just what I believed was why I had some success and what I thought we could build a culture on. And I've stuck to that to this day. I believe in those things. And, not an overly talented guy by any means, but persisting and expecting to be accountable and productive as you can be puts you probably in a pretty good spot, right?
Yeah, no, I love that, JD, because that speaks to your character as a leader. It speaks to you and what you're all about. It's really powerful. Johnny
and JD, I'm going to summarize here on some great things that we heard. And Johnny, there's so many golden nuggets in this, so I want to make sure that you get a chance to put yours in there too. But I loved the 3 feet. That was a big takeaway for me. Your humility as you're talking, I wrote down servant leadership, and what a great example you are of servant leadership. We talked about the importance of recruiting the right people with the right fit for the entire team. The mindset of the walk-on, being able to articulate and learn from the struggle and therefore be able to coach through the struggle was a big takeaway for me. The head coaching notebook, which really you're putting together other people's things. And then you said, wait a second, I want to be true to myself. And I'm really about 3 things: accountability, productivity, and consistency. And those were some big takeaways for me. Johnny, did you have any other ones?
Just how JD's been really true to himself as a leader, constantly being, consistent. And I think mixed in all of that, or surrounded by all that, is being very, very realistic about where he is, the team that he has, what's in front of him, and what is he going to do about it. And that's what you really need to be a great leader. It's really hard. The only other thing is that we touched on early is how you have to be intimate with your players. If you don't really get to know your players, if you don't get to understand, their fears, their securities, their doubts, their motivations, you're going to have a really difficult time motivating that group of people.
Yeah. Love that.
Not treating them cookie cutter. They're all
love that. Yeah. Well done. JD, you ready for a little rapid fire? We like to do this at the end of the podcast, a little rapid fire for fun.
All right.
Just a few kind of easy questions here. What is your ideal day off of work?
Oh, I can tell you that one. So back in the coaching days, we'd go down to Naples, and I'd get up. We'd take a quick walk along the beach, come back. I'd go downstairs in the condo to the sauna and steam, shower, come back up, and we'd walk down to her folks' place and have a little breakfast. Then we'd take the kids out to the beach and pool, come back for a little lunch, go back to the beach for a little bit, and then have a margarita in the afternoon, get the kids back to bed and sit out on the lanai and hear the ocean come in. The sound of water is just therapy for me.
You just described John McMahon's daily routine, man, in Naples, Florida. JD, he's in Naples, and I'm south. I'm a little south in Marco Island, so come down and visit us.
Oh, I'm going to. Naples is just it for me. Yeah, that whole Gulf Coast.
Yeah,
is a special place.
All right, we're
invited anytime.
We're going to hold you to it. That'll be a blast. All right, JD, what's your favorite meal?
Ooh, Javier's Cabo Azul on PCH in Newport Beach. It's a crab enchilada, a lobster taco, and then I can't remember the other one. Another chili relleno, crab chili relleno.
Those are unique ones. I love those.
He's very, very specific, Jay.
Those are specific, John.
He knows the place and the menu.
We've gotten pizza and some sushi, and I like yours, JD.
This is the place. And but here's the deal. That plate's gone up in the last 12 months from $28 to $46 now.
Yeah.
So this is
And so did the gas to get you. So did the gas to get you to the restaurant.
That's right.
All right, favorite movie, JD.
Oh, Gladiator.
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
I like that one.
Love it.
Good. I thought you were going to say, "Remember the Titans."
No, that was good. That was good.
That was a good one. All right.
So when Harry met Sally, but
All right. Nachos / potato chips or hamburger cheeseburger.
can
I think I messed that one up.
Can I go?
Hang on, I messed that one up.
I think Kaplan messed that thing up.
I messed that up. How could I mess that up? Nachos or potato chips, brother?
Nacho.
All right, easy. Hamburger or cheeseburger?
Hamburger. Absolutely.
Would you said hamburger?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Last one, and I know academic All-American. Let's rip the cover off this one.
Okay.
Favorite subject in school?
I'll tell you, my most influential was a class called DECA, Distributive Education Clubs of America. It really took me out of the shell. It was a business class, learned about human relations, a little bit about sales, and probably was a catalyst to me getting into sales.
Mm. Hey,
Served
JD,
you well.
I can't thank you enough. I think there's so many amazing nuggets just in this last hour. I feel like we could have talked to you for hours and got a lot more, but thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
Very, very
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Good catching up again. Cap, pleasure.
JD, it was great meeting you. Thank you for being with us. And for all of you listening, thank you to listening to Revenue Builder.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.